into this if you want. I'm not sure how that works or how good. Do you guys want me to like post the link as a announcement? Yeah, so because it's being live streamed in. Okay, so let me put the link here. It is running right now, but I'm going to copy the link, go back to here. I'll make a quick announcement. So today's live stream, so I might delete it later because there'll probably be more than one of these. And then I'll save that, and you should have it now. Yeah. Yeah.
Is it, where in the book is it?
So it should say what number it is.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about the stuff leading up to it today, and I might actually let you start working on it today. So having posted that, if we look at the first actual assignment. So, and again, the dates of these are a little approximate, but so where it says chapter 2, if you go to, can you turn off? The one thing that might be good is to turn off the sound. So it isn't echoing. Is that it's still echoing? I'm just waiting, wonder where that sound is. So at least turn the sound way down, or at least maybe turn it off. Is it up there that it's echoing?
Maybe it's the sound from the computer.
But it never did that. We'll see how this goes. That echo could drive me nuts.
Yeah.
All right. Same as saying like the infinite echo. Is there anyone? So there's nobody that has voice coming out of their machine. It's just there. But if I turn it off, there won't be any. Actually, if I turn off the sound, that should still allow the mic, right? Yeah. I don't want to turn off the mic, but what happens if I turn that off? That's better.
Yeah.
What you'll have to tell me afterwards is whether or not this records the sound. It should. I just turned off the speaker, not the mic. So I'll have to remember to do that, to turn off the speaker, because that's really annoying. So for the assignments, where it says 2.1, if you go to the end of the chapter, there's a thing called programming exercises. And literally, so it's programming exercises for chapter 2, first one, 2.1. And then chapter 2.3, right? And I tried to give you a little bit of what it is in case you don't have the book yet. So a little bit of a description of what it's doing. And then the extra credit is 2.10. So that's how those work. All right, so we got this going. Let me close that down. Bring that down. So I'm going to try. I'm going to zoom up for just a minute for this, and then I will zoom down again, because you can zoom inside of Visual Studio Code. So again, this is optional, but Visual Studio Code is nice for a lot of reasons, and it's free, and it will run. Unlike Visual Studio, though there is a version for the Mac, but there's not really a version for Linux. VS Code will run on any platform. It's free. It'll run on any platform. It works just fine. I really like it on Linux because you can get the bash shell in there. I'll show you in a moment. But I'm going to just type. And as I said, if this isn't set up right, we'll just forget it and go back to idle. And you're welcome to use idle if you prefer it. So I'm going to do Visual Studio Code. I'm actually going to zoom. Well, I'll leave it zoom for a minute. Now, I was playing with it. So I'm going to do a new, can I get back to a new state for this? Well, I'm going to close Hello Pi. And I'll just, tells me there's an update available. I don't care. Linter pylint is not there. Git isn't there. I'm going to close the I'm going to close the terminal for right now because it isn't open by default. No, actually, it just gave me the terminal. Let's see what state yours is in. So you're there. What you want to do first is probably go File, and let's do basically just a new folder. So we'll do a new file, except I'm in a folder. I want a whole new folder. So I'm going to do open folder. All right. And one of the things you can do here is you can create a new folder. So I'm going to create a new folder called Python programs. I'm just doing a place to put my programs. So ITC 110 works, but I want to go through the whole process. So I click on that. Down here, I do select folder. And I'm not going to, I guess I'll save what I had. But all right, so we've got that. So we got save workspace. Why is it? Did I do save file too? I don't need a file name. I don't know what that is for. Let's cancel that. So we've got, oh, I didn't do it. Untitled one. Let's do file. I never have trouble with this. Open folder, Python programs. Select folder. Oh, I know why it was saving. Because I wanted to, I said I was going to save the what I had there before. That was the file. So we have Python programs here. So if I go there, now, and this looks more like what you've got, right? So let me zoom down. Once you're in here, you can, there's a view and there's a zoom. In here, go debug tasks. I'm looking for the zoom. Is it under file? Why am I not finding anything that I find all the other times? Help. Task debug. I know there's a zoom in here. I guess I'll just zoom up. Okay, so under Python programs, there are these little icons. There's new file, new folder. So if you want subfolders, you can do this. You can do a new file. Is yours working so far? So I'm going to do a new file. And I'm going to name it, what do we want to name it? Let's do a simple Python thing. And yeah, blanks. So let's do our hello pi again, which is really boring, but so it will give you right? It'll give you this open space. Now, if you don't have this terminal down here, and you can close out a lot of these. I might want to install PyLint. You might have it, but we'll do it later. This is the terminal, and you can get that by doing View Terminal. And it gives you the different terminals. By default, it gives you PowerShell in Windows. It gives you the Bash shell in Linux. I assume it would give you the Bash shell in Mac too. Yeah.
Is the PowerShell like really similar to the command prompt? Because like I've messed around with both of them, and I everything that the command prompt does, I could do in the PowerShell, but like I've never like wrapped my head around like what they both are.
All right. So the main difference, the command prompt is the old, basically what's left of the DOS shell. PowerShell has a lot more functionality. Like the Bash shell, it's programmable, but it's you can write scripts and things like that, and it has more power, and particularly more administrative power. Like if you're a system administrator, if you go in with PowerShell, you can manipulate all the Windows and network connections and stuff. So it's just more powerful. On the level of Python, both work about the same. As I said, we're not going to do a lot with PowerShell except to just run things. So up here, if I do, so I'm going to do a comment, and I'll just say, this is the old and boring hello world again. Oops. Okay, so there's our comment, and then I'm going to do def main and do a thing. So remember where we did this, where we did so if you're not getting any error messages, and if it's color coded, then it's working. Does that make sense? So I'm just going to, in main, I'm going to do an input. So I'm going to say name equals input, enter your name, and then I'm just going to print hello, and then I'll just do a comma and name, because we did this before. And then you need to go back to the edge, but just do main, home main. Okay. So that's basically where we were. We did a little bit more than that last time. We did the chaos program. We're going to do the temp program this time and a couple of other things. Yeah. Does it need to be bigger?
Yeah.
Here's the zoom.
I think when you were zooming, like, the stream was coming perfectly for me earlier, and then all of a sudden it went in this tiny box.
Oh. So the zoom wasn't working?
No, I think it's when other people join.
Oh, that might be. I'm looking for the zoom in here, because there is a zoom where I can zoom this up. And it should be under view. Terminal, search, appearance.
You have to click on the appearance.
Yeah, and then zoom out. Or zoom in. And I want to keep zooming in. Down to appearance. Okay. So it's Control plus. That's actually all I need to know. And let me make this bigger. Let me click over the screen. Is that better, or you need it bigger yet?
A little bigger.
Better?
Yeah, that's better.
What?
No.
I can't see a thing. There we go.
You can't see a thing.
No, I just don't understand why, like, it's not on the full screen anymore. Like, there's just black bars around it.
I have no idea what's happening with the screen capture. It looks like it's all right. That's your thing, though, right? Yeah.
Mine doesn't change.
So, have you installed Python?
I don't.
So let's go to, yeah, so let's, oh yeah, we'll do it and bring up the menu. So it's at the top. And then, we want to install Python. Can you get back to the main code?
I think this is what's
That's the main menu.
not on Visual Studio Code. I just installed it.
Right, but I'm not sure that this is. Let's go to the one.
Start debugging.
No, let's do it. We also figure out the documentation release. I don't think this is seen Python. It may be on the machine, but I think it needs to be hooked to Python. Okay. Oh, and it's not hard to do. I'm just not sure where that would work.
Okay. I'll use the idle.
Yeah, idle is fine. Anyone else? So is the video?
Yeah, I can clear.
Oh, okay, good. It just took a while when I was adjusting things. Is
Yeah.
things up for a second? And this is big enough?
Yes. How can we run the program?
All right, I'm going to show you. So I like that it has numbers, the color coding. This is a terminal down here. So I am going to go to so my menu is gone when oh, it's really tiny. My menu didn't enlarge. So if you go to debug, there's start debugging. It also has F5. So if you press F5, it will run. And it says PyLint isn't installed, which I may do in a minute. But notice down here, it says enter your name. Right, so it gives you some stuff, it gives you the path, but down here it has enter your name. So I will do, I have to click down here. I will do Steve, which is sort of a pain, but then it does hello Steve, and then it exits. So it works down here in the terminal. So it doesn't have the environment. Did others fail at the F5 or not?
Yeah, nothing happened.
So it may not be set up properly. Let's do view. Or I mean debug. Start debugging. Has the right color coding, it's just not running. Is that true for everybody?
Yeah, I can't download the extension.
Did it work when you downloaded the extension? So you went to.
What prompted you when I first opened
So the extension, was it the Python extension? Or
Yeah. I think it was.
Yeah, yours probably isn't hooked at all. All right, let's go back to idle. We could debug this. You're welcome to use it if you've got it working. As I said, I prefer it, but if I don't want to spend a lot of time making it work right now. Did yours work?
No, some
Yeah, you just have to download the Python plugin.
So where do you get it if you're not on the main screen?
In the extensions, I think you still have that little square thingy, and then just
Down here.
Python.
So if you want to use this, if you go here, that little square, and download Python.
Yeah, maybe.
Mine has Python, it's working. So yeah, get the top one. and yeah, install it. It seems to be allowing an install, so. Yeah, I'm not gonna. So mine has the Python.
Maybe that's what's in it.
But yours, yeah, if you download the install. All right, yeah, reload it. So once it's installed, do a reload.
And then press F5.
Yeah, and then see if it works. All right, so right there, you did.
No.
All right, so click on this.
No, I just like came back to like saying
Go through the top one. Then install the
Did you get it too?
Not going.
Did you download it?
No.
Oh, press reload. Click on reload. And then it should work, and then press F5.
After you install it, you have to reboot.
Did you press F5?
Yeah, I have already.
Oh,
When you do it, it
Yeah,
should
but
work.
I don't know how it's not working.
So you tried,
Yeah.
tried F5 and it didn't work. Yes, you, I think you got it with me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
probably that fine. Thank you. Now works perfectly.
All you have to say has a pay.
Oh, it's got different. No, it's just-
It looks like you got the initial color. So if you scroll up, personal, it shows blue and green.
So that's
That's good.
Yeah, it's good.
Um, you have to install the yeah, so you have to install that the Python extension. And then that go to the bottom one. Yeah.
Yeah, I just Wednesdays.
Search for Python. No, right there, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't watch the live.
Hey, thank you.
On Saturday, I was like, yeah.
Was yours working? Now when I look. Okay, I'm glad it doesn't make me look everybody. I had no It was working fine on Thursday, just not the BS code. Because everyone keeps getting.
We'll just press F5 and see what it works.
I'm like, sorry, I didn't take this shot. No, that wasn't my fault. That was the next one. I guess.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what you do by the. Yeah. I've heard this whole story.
So in the create, For a segment, it was just only to make this, right?
Oh.
Just to advise how many times it's gonna read it.
Yeah, it's change it so that you.
This is actually what I was hoping not to
Then,
do,
like,
is
I
go
want
around
to
and
be
get
short.
everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't think it was that expensive. I think it was like $60. Yeah, but you can also rent it too.
Let's do that. Or you can pick up home control
This is all I have. It's just like.
and you have a place where
Okay, so now it's
The time that I got, I do the same.
so let's try to
Yeah, you should be good.
Yeah, no, but it's working.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
tested.
Cool.
I think it'll work here now.
And that's
It
the only
wasn't
thing that
regular.
really is, right?
Yeah, it's also that quiz. Yeah, you
Yours
got
worked okay?
Because I
we did
always
it in
start.
class. And it was like super.
Yours worked okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's all
I
right.
thought it was good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It gave this, that was new.
Go to, downtown here.
Oh, my bad. Like, this was new. This wasn't there for
Oh, you know why? Yes. Otherwise, it's hard of,
Oh, and that was fine.
you know, give put it in go up. Yeah. Well.
Oh, this is supposed to be training.
Okay. Anyone else? How are things down this side? They said this is the thing I was trying to avoid.
I was thank you.
Yours isn't working because it's me to go left. And then press F5. And then it'll work. Yeah, but it's not working because it's supposed to say hi down here. So take main and move it to the left. No, just
try
main.
typing your name in. So you could actually,
No.
maybe.
And then now it's enter your name. Yeah, I can help you too. And then press enter. There, now. Say hi.
All right, so is everybody working? What did you? I think it will if we move main over. So.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or does it just do a F5 or? So a couple of things. All right, so I've got, let's go back to Hello Pi. All right, so I guess we can use this if you guys want. Now, it's entirely up to you which one you're more comfortable in. You might prefer idle. And if you do, great. Idle is really simple.
Yeah.
This is a little less simple, but it's kind of nice in its own way. So.
More information.
What?
Even more information.
It gives you more information. Some of this information you may not want, but it does. Again, in certain environments, like if you were doing Django, which we're not going to do in this quarter, but it's Python for the web, and you constantly have to go to the command line to run certain side programs, and it's really nice to have a terminal down here for that. I mean, you could have another terminal window open, but it's nice to have the terminal window in here. And it makes it easy to change directories and do all sorts of things in here. So we've got, everybody's got that working. Okay. As I said, that wasn't what my main purpose was for today, but that's okay. It should stay working now. Although, if you switch machines, you may have to do it again, right? Because if it was on a machine that wasn't done. All right, so we're mostly talking about stuff in Chapter 2, and it's just a real introduction to programming. One of the things that they talk about is that you should actually go through a process when you're programming. Basically, you should analyze the problem, figure out the steps, and then write the program, debug it, test it, and then later, if it needs, you can maintain it. Those are kind of the steps. The steps that people mostly skip are the analysis and the planning, but those are really important. The stuff that we're going to do for quite a while is going to be so simple that it may not seem all that worthwhile. But when things get complicated, it is actually worthwhile to go through and spend some time with paper. Or if you don't have such a thing around anymore, at least on the computer, figure out what the steps are involved, what has to be done, right? Know what needs to be done first, second, third, etc. We'll talk about that a little bit. So I'm going to let's do another program, and you can just close these if you want, and then do, so I'm going to go over to the file. These double things here give you the folder list. And again, it's a really easy way to navigate, particularly if you have multiple folders going, which in some environments you do. Here, when I click at the Python programs is the folder that I made. I could create a new file or a subfolder, or I can go back. So I'm going to create a new file. And I think I will call this, because I think the book calls it this, conversion py. Naming conventions are kind of up to you. I think actually they usually don't capitalize the name of it, but it doesn't matter. It's just a file name. So when I click out of there, notice that I'm got a blank workspace. This is conversion py. I'm not sure what extension py. That just tells you that I'm working in Python. Okay, and what I'm going to do in this program, if you want not to follow me, let's see if I can remember where it is here. It's in Chapter 2, page 30. They call it convert, not conversion. So it's basically, they have comments, except I'm going to call it conversion because that's what I called it. It's always good to have comments at the top. And so it converts Fahrenheit to Celsius. Is that right? Yeah. No, it actually converts Celsius to Fahrenheit. It goes the other way. So one of the things that you would probably want to do right at the start, and then it doesn't hurt if you do your name here. Not that generally when you're turning things in on Canvas, there's no question as to who did it, but it's good. It's a good idea as a general practice to kind of sign your programs. So how would you, if you were analyzing what to do with this, where would you start? I mean, we've got the code right here, but yeah.
Turn a variable into an expression that can do the math equation, and then it as this is Celsius to Fahrenheit.
And you might also, I mean, for me, I always have to go look it up what the formula is. So you want to be clear of what the formula is. I kind of wish we all just use Celsius because it makes more sense.
Yeah, I know, right?
But since we don't, so basically, yeah. So you'd look up one of the steps that you need to do. I'm just going to make another comment here. So so you evaluate what it is that you want to do. I would look up the conversion formula. I would get the Celsius. All right, so you're going to get that from input. That's input, not input. You're going to, when you press enter, sometimes it runs down here, which is not what I want. You're going to apply the equation, right? Apply the equation that it converts it. And then you're going to display the results. That's sort of the algorithm for this, display the results. Now you might actually list the equation if you wanted, which is basically 9/5 times C for Celsius plus 32. You don't have to list that, but you can. I'm curious. So they do 9/5. This is what's called an integer division. We'll talk a little bit more about math later. Do you guys know what an integer division does? You guys remember third grade? It's the last time you probably ever dealt with integer divisions. Yeah, it gives you a remainder. So this doesn't return the remainder. Basically what it does is it strips off any decimal part. There is another operator to return the remainder if you want. But an integer division, where it's whole numbers on either side with no decimal places, it's going to ignore any decimal place. That's how they do the formula here, so I imagine that works. If you put a .0 on one of those numbers, then it would default to a float. All right, so let's do the actual program. And one reason I'm doing this, even though it's in the book, is that this is one part of the assignment is just to do the reverse of this. Which, if you need to look up the equation on the internet, you can. Slightly different. So I'm going to do a def main. Okay, and again, it would work even if we didn't do a def main, right? You can in Python you can just write out the commands and it'll do them one after another. But it's good form to block them, to make a block of the main. Later, when we get more sophisticated, we'll have multiple functions, and then the main is there just to call the first one, right? Just to start the train going. So we need to do the things. We've looked up the conversion formula. So we're going to get the Celsius from input, right? So we can do Celsius equals, so I don't know, would it be float? Yeah, you can do eval. Eval will let you, it be any number you want. Forget what page it is. He has a note about how evil eval is. Because it can be used to attack your program, basically. He says security doesn't matter when you're doing it like this, which is true, but that basically when you get out there, you should probably use. But I'm not sure if we want what we want there, so let's do it as eval. And then just input and please enter Celsius temperature. I was talking to somebody that lives in Europe, and they were saying when they see temperatures in the U.S., they think, are they literally burning in hell? 115, say like in Arizona, would be above the boiling mark. So, all right, so we've got our input, right? One thing I will mention here, since we're doing this, we're just declaring the variable right here, right? Celsius is just a variable that we made right here. It is declared at that moment. In Python, you don't have to give it a type. We could declare it. Another way we could do this, though it really is just, I mean, we could, it's really not really relevant. We could just say Celsius. That's a declaration. It won't give an error if we do that. If we wanted to definitely give it a type, we could do float Celsius. And it would be happy with that too. So if you wanted to give it a type, you could do that. But you don't have to in Python. Sometimes you want to. If you want to be really strict about what and really control how it's going to come out, then you probably should give it a type. But right here, this declares the variable. I could say C also, right? I don't have to say Celsius. It is better to create variables that are self-describing. C, kind of, but not quite, you know, is. You might also want to, let's do, I think they do this too. Let's do a quick print and give a description for the user. This program converts Celsius, I can't type, temperatures to, and this is always a pain to spell, Fahrenheit. I've never actually understood how the Fahrenheit system evolved. All right, so does that make sense? We're just giving them a little prompt and then another prompt. Notice too the double parentheses here. We'll be doing this at other time. This is two functions together, right? Eval is a function, so it starts with the parentheses. Input is a function, it starts with the parentheses. So you can have functions embedded in other functions. And sometimes you can get them 3, 4, 5, 6 deep. Okay, so let's do the next thing we need to do is apply the equation. So I'm going to do Fahrenheit, and it sees that I get IntelliSense. It doesn't know if it's spelled right or anything. It's really just going by what I typed up above. Right, so it knows that I typed a variable named that. So it's going to give that to me. Is equal to 9 divided by 5 times Celsius. So this is our variable again. Whatever we enter is what it's going to be, plus 32. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And you guys know the order of operations, because it'll follow those orders. It'll do the division first, and it'll do the multiplications, and then it'll just do them in the order that they are. But even if we did 32 plus, it would still do the division and the multiplication first and add the 32 at the end. It always does multiplications and divisions first and then additions and subtractions. It can get more complicated than that, but we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Okay, and so the last thing we're going to do is this is the output. We're just going to print the I'll capitalize that, although it doesn't matter. What's in quotes, it doesn't, it's just literal. It doesn't matter a whole lot. Okay, so this real simply is following the whole basic pattern. Remember I said basically you get your input, you do your processing, and then you get your output. This does that in 3 lines, input, output. Sometimes it's a lot more complicated than that. So with luck, when I press F5, keeps telling me that I don't have that processed. Oh, you know what I haven't done? Know why that did nothing? Yeah, I haven't called main. And again, remember that main, in order to call it, you have to bring it out to the margin. Because if it's inside here with this, it's part of this function. And so the function never gets called, and main never gets called. So main has to be out at the outer margin. So now it should run. Oh, all right, and no. So I'm going to enter a Celsius temperature. So what temperature do you want? What is it now? About 52? 55? Oh, are you 55 or 5?
14.
Well, we can do that. That is, oh,
Because
I'm entering
in
Celsius. Yeah.
In Celsius, it's 14 right now.
Right. So if I run it again, so 14 would be 57.2.
Mm-hmm.
131. I can see, like, when we say that it's 90 degrees out there, wondering what's going on.
Did it work?
Did it work for you guys?
Yeah.
Let's see what's wrong. So you did,
I'm not sure.
maybe oh, display the results.
Oh, is this?
No, that's fine. Display the results needs to have a comment. Because it's trying to interpret that as a command and it can't. So what do we get? Invalid syntax where line 13. Celsius, you have to have an input inside that. See how you have your vowel input? Yeah. See, what is the error? Doesn't have the so you have the so it should be fine. That's what so you do it. Did you do that now? Oh, you know what? it's not actually doing anything. I'll hit the main one. It needs to go to the margin. Now try it.
No, I'm saying,
Yeah, so this one. Yours already.
The words here, I copy paste. Oh, but
Alright. That was really hard to see because there's only like one space. Here's is over there. Here's is over there. You guys are okay. Let's do it. Best. Learning is not fun. Oh, let's go to differently. So notice how you spoke about an H there and it spoke with the Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah. So let's see here. No, so that one. Oh, you need to close that parenthesis. Yeah. Okay, so another word. Oh, yeah, those need to come back to that one. Yeah. And the next. That's right. There you go. So be careful of spaces. If one space is enough to screw it up.
I use the idle, right? And I copy and paste here, but it's so.
Let's look at what is the word? Reval. Let's see inside the reval. Can you see that? So reval includes these interfaces. Oh, it says please enter, but then it failed at the.
Yeah, it fell in the middle.
So let's do it. Then we just want to success plus 82.
Same for the enter name just now. It says define name, while full name, it says define name, undefined.
Well, let's kill the. Just click it. All right, let's just.
I'm running again.
Yeah. So this should go down. So it doesn't go to the next one. So it does that, and then you go out.
No, you're not.
Okay. Okay, so it's the errors on the equation. What about if it's on the equation? I wonder does it need to space between the operators? Like literally a space between the 9 foot times. Let's see if that makes a difference. I'm not sure if it should matter.
Same for the one we practiced before, enter name. It worked on idle and I copy paste here. It says this one works. Or if in the later course I only use this one.
That's fine, yeah.
Okay, then it's fine. Maybe it just not my type of project.
It might be, I mean, I'm wondering if it's reading something other than.
I'm taking 3. This one and relevant. Yeah, relevant. 134. Yeah. I didn't see it. See it after that. And also taking the guitar class. What? Oh dear. So what's your goal? Me, just for fun. I mean, piano? No piano. You play piano? Oh, that's cool. How long you have been playing? You must be really good at it. How old are you? I'm taking a 25. Oh, it's your age. So I play transfer later.
What I want to do is, so I can create like
It's a 1K. Lottery. Oh, okay. Also, you got a lottery. Oh, lucky. So you already got it, or is it? I thought I heard it has a very long line, very long queue. I'm not sure. 4 years. Not bad. Right here. I know we cannot.
yeah.
Yeah, Hong Kong, Taiwan, but the chance is really low. So you have very good luck. So your family is all here. Just your relatives. Why Seattle? Why come to Seattle?
Because I got some friends here.
Friends?
I was taking some English classes. After that,
This is the place learning. Seattle is all about technology. That's why I'm learning. All my friends know it and they know that.
so did you take some theory?
Yeah.
So when you can consider your overseas?
When I come here, I went to university. Yeah, I already graduated and also had a master's. Also got a master's. Now I just learn it, but I'm not academic. I come, that was 7 years ago. I started university in Johnstown, on the east.
So do you like my job?
Yeah, we after video we set up we start with some do the real estate. We're just yeah, just learn like a basic. All my friends know it. A lot of my friends work in Microsoft Amazon. We hang out and talk about this shit. And no idea what they're talking about. I said, man, I have to go back to this. And I have to get a child credit to be a full-time student. That's why I'm thinking, yeah, we talk about this or I need another transfer credit. So you can, yeah, they will give us certificate after credits. But I learned it how
What it's doing is it's taking your
Basically, how do I right to the corner? Yeah.
why. I mean, master degree already kills my man. After that, I'm done with schooling. I never go back to school. I started doing my hair, started to drop in the class. It's hard. It is. Yeah. So the way we, we have 8 weeks every semester, and you meet your instructor once every week for 3 hours. And so the second time you meet him, the third time you meet him, you will be a meet them. And the seventh, sixth time, the eighth time you meet him is fine. And you have basically I was that's crazy. Like for this class, I didn't even buy the textbook.
I'm not sure.
So you have to kind of no idea what the teacher is.
All right, so let's go back. Let's do a little bit more here before the assignment. I want to talk about a couple more things. There's a couple. Is anybody else getting it where it thinks that you're doing Node.js? When you get an editor saying that Python is not a recognized command, but Python's installed, I'm just wondering because I'm having trouble fixing that on one machine here. But it was on a couple of machines. What we did is we changed folders and it worked, right? I'm not sure. That's weird. All right. So we talked about, I didn't mean to necessarily go and debug quite so much, but I wanted to show you on page 32, if you're interested, it has a list of all of the reserved words. There are actually more than this. There are a lot of function names. Like it doesn't include input, and it doesn't include eval, and it doesn't include, because those are all function names, right? But the core language, there's about, I'm just at a wild guess, about 30 words. That's not atypical. A lot of programming languages have a fairly sparse number of really core words. And then they have a whole lot of pre-built functions for you. Part of what makes Python valuable, part of what makes a lot of languages valuable is that they've written thousands of functions for you that you don't have to write. And you can just use them. Okay, so we've done input and we've done output, assignment. One of the things, let's do a couple more loops because it does talk about loops. Do you guys remember how to do a loop? I'm going to do a new file. So under my Python programs, I'm going to add a new file. I'll call it loops.py. So we're going to do, basically, this is just going to be to look at counted loops. Remember we did this last time? How do you do, so I'm going to do a def main. How do you start a loop? Yeah, so it's before, and then you need some kind of variable, right? And it could be anything. Typically it's I. And the reason why it's I typically is it's just short for integer, right? It's a counter, but it could be the word counter. It could be anything you want. There's nothing magic about I. We're declaring the variable at that moment. And then it has in range, and you can put in how many loops you want to do. So we did this last time, but I want to kind of reiterate it again. So we could do 10. All right. A loop is a block. So it takes a colon at the end, and then we have another set of indentions after that.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and then we can say what we want to do in that loop. Let's do, I don't know if it's in this one, but let's do like, we could do, you could even do like, let's do, I'm making this up as I go, but I'm going to say number equals, we'll enter integers, so input, I'm going to do a little bit, some of this will be like math, I'm afraid, but so we're going to get, for 10 times, we're going to enter 10 numbers. And we're going to do like sum equals, now, here's a good question. Does this have this? This may not be in the chapter. This is the same as, and maybe we should just do it this way because I don't think we've introduced that operator. Equals the same as sum plus number. And you might want to, it's usually not important here, but we could say sum equals 0 to start off, just to make sure. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So what we're going to do is we're going to enter 10 numbers and get a total for them, right? And then what I'm going to do is, yeah, well, I'm going to do a couple of things. So one of the things I'm going to come back to inside the main here, but outside the loop, right? So I'm back to the same level as the loop. I'm going to say that the average equals sum divided by the, I'm just going to do it literal. I'm going to do 10.0 so it gets the decimals in there. All right. So we're doing two calculations. We've got a sum and an average. Yeah.
So the syntax,
So this is, yeah, so this isn't in the for loop. And one of the reasons why I declared sum equals 0 out there,
oh, so the average isn't in the for loop?
it is not in the for loop. It's outside the for loop. And I declared sum outside the for loop because there's a thing called scope, and he doesn't start talking about this for a while. But if you declare something inside the for loop, it only exists inside the for loop, right? You wouldn't be able to see it out here. And there's better ways to do this, but that's like we could do you could declare sum as a float. You could cast it to a float, but we're just going to put 10.0. That makes it a float. It'll default to whatever is the higher precision. So I couldn't see sum out here if I hadn't declared it outside the loop. All right, and then we're doing a loop. All right, and the range doesn't have to be 10. It can do whatever you want. Right, and I'll show you in a bit that we'll change that to a variable. We've done most of this before, but it's good to get a second shot at it. For loops are really important. One of the things that computers do really well is do the same thing over and over again. And then this is basically, there is an operator, that plus equal, which does the same thing as this, but the chapter hasn't introduced it, so I'll leave it. But so what we're doing is each time we add a new number, we're adding it to sum. And then like we've got our inputs we'll get as we enter it, and then we will do our printouts. So I'm going to print the total is, actually I don't need, I'll just do a comma total or sum. And we'll do another print. And again, single quotes or double quotes, it doesn't matter. And then we'll just do average. All right. And I think that's it except for to call main. And again, you have to go all the way to the edge and call main. So a couple of things we've done in there that are a little bit more sophisticated. We have a loop. So we have, this is our definition of the main function, and we have to indent. And the dots there, if you get them, are showed indents 4 spaces. Some, like maybe idle indents a little differently, which might be part of the problem when you copy and paste over, although I swear I've copied and pasted with no problem.
Is there a way to get the dots? I don't have them.
You know, I'm not sure. I'm sure there is. I'm not sure why I have them. It's got to be in the view or the options. So options are probably under file, preferences.
View, it's all in view.
It's in view.
Yeah.
Under appearance. Oh, toggle mode. Anyway, everything is customizable. Is this visible enough? I usually don't use dark mode on the screen because it doesn't project as well as the white mode. Yeah.
Instead of, for the average, instead of doing sum divided by 10, can you use sum divided by range? Or gonna work?
So possibly. Let me look into that because I think that there's probably a slightly different syntax for that. There is something where you could do a range. Like I might show that in just a second. Because you could call if you just call the range, and sometimes it infers the whole for loop.
Okay, yeah.
There's in the book a chapter, it has a list range 10, and it'll create a list of the values in that range.
Oh.
So I'm not sure. One of the things that would be better, like if we wanted to control how many loops you did, you just make a variable. So we'll just say, I don't think loops is actually a keyword, so we could say loops equals int input how many loops or how many numbers do you want to enter? And then instead of doing 10 here, we just do loops. And then you can do loops. Now, the problem with this is we're going to get an integer division. Sum is an integer. Actually, sum isn't necessarily an integer. And let's see what happens. We could float if we have to. One of the things we could do is we could just make float sum. Or another way to make it a float. And then it'll definitely do a full division. All right. Other questions on that? We keep adding stuff to it. All right, so let's try running that. I will install that later, but not now. So I'm going to try F5 again and close this. So how many numbers do you want to enter? And let's just do 5. So I'm going to enter an integer. I didn't leave myself a space there, and I should have. So I'm going to do 5, 7, 12, 13, 3. So the total is 40, and the average is 8, because it's 40 divided by 5. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did you want us? I didn't change the beacons. We did not, but like.
So if you don't change it, you have to do 10 loops, right?
So is it better just to follow this loop itself, or?
Well, I wanted to show, this is a little bit more readable. One of the things you generally want to avoid when you're programming is what they call magic numbers, which are just, you say something is equal to a number.
How did you get the final result after you list all the integers? Mine just keeps saying enter an integer.
And it never goes. What did you do? How many loops did you do?
Some there.
Well, that actually would be it. Because I think for loops, and when you entered loops, you said 5. Well, I mean, how many loops did you say? Right. How many did you say? So you just went into the loop again.
I tried to enter the screen.
Well, you can, although that should do it. Yeah, it's better if you don't stop with that. Stop. Okay, then do that. Just curious.
Okay.
I have no idea what it's right.
Just stop because.
Yeah. How many worked?
I had the same problem.
It's still doing the. We can figure it out in here, so we can figure it out in here.
I don't know what's.
You get to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, although that doesn't matter. I mean, the amount of these, but I think it would be one more. said 4 and range to 10. So you need to put like a loops in there. In the range. Loops. Loops is the variable that is keeping track of how many loops you want to go. As is, it's going to go to 10. Right, so in the parentheses it says 10. 3.7 loops. And then down here, where it says 10.9. Divided by loops. Yeah, loops. Get rid of the 10.
Oh.
So loops will be whatever number you say you want to do. And then go ahead and do the other stuff. That's what we want to do. So how many numbers do you have to have? Now the reason why you get zeros is because they're interested in oh, and this should be good. Yeah.
We need to indent main. Okay. And so delete that. Hit delete.
So I will, yeah.
Because the way that it's indented right there.
You have range 10, so it's still going to go 10. So it needs to be changed to loops.
Yeah, you can do that.
Oh, you do this in the parentheses. So you have an open parentheses for and then you have two parentheses. So let's restart it. So you said 5. This should work. Let's just start debugging.
And then.
Okay, so say how many you want to.
Since you said that the
Can I press enter? This is like line 6. For I in range loops. OU lowercase here and capital there. Have to match. So actually at this point, there's not a whole lot more. If you want to work on the first assignment, you can. If you call it a little bit, call it a morning if you want. I will give you a little time to work on the assignment on now and a little bit on whenever we meet again, Thursday. And then we'll talk about the next thing. But I think this is mostly of what's in the chapter, our loops. Do you guys have questions about them? And again, we're trying to debug if you prefer idle, which is simpler, you're welcome to use it. Okay. This one has some advantages, but idle has the advantage of simplicity. Yeah.
Is this free?
It is free, and it'll run on anything. It'll run on Macs, it'll run on Linux, it'll run on Windows. No, this is real lightweight. The nice thing about this too is that not only does Python, you can do any language in it. Basically, you just have to attach it. Yeah.
You're back there though. When you hit Shift T to capitalize it, doesn't capitalize T.
Huh.
Works on every other character but T.
That is weird.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a keyboard or not.
I don't think these keyboards are programmable, so I don't know why it would do that.
I can hit the caps and then hit T and it'll capitalize it, but Shift T does nothing.
That's strange.
It just keeps it lowercase.
That is very weird. So the very last one.
Yeah, the very last one. Everything else functions on it fine.
Yeah.
Just the assignment rubric, what's the IO?
Oh, input output.
Input output, okay.
So
You just want us to list.
yeah, just what is the input output. So on the assignment, I did mention like input output IO. That's what I mean by it is input output. So the input here, there's two inputs, the number of loops, right? And the other input is the integers that you enter. So if you wanted to list the inputs, it would be the number of loops and the input, the integer inputs. What are the outputs?
The result average.
Yeah, the
total.
sum and the average, right? So it's just to get you the idea of thing. Every program basically takes something in. Again, it can come from an input like this, user input, or it could come from a file, or it could come from a database. But typically, every program takes some kind of input, does something to it, right? Processes it, and then outputs it. That's basically what every program does. It's just that the inputs can be really complicated, the outputs can be complicated, and processing can be complicated. But it's always just those three things, basically. And so in the assignment, it's in, although I shouldn't say this, but I'm extremely lax about that. If you don't do it, I probably don't take points off for it. But I just ask, to list the inputs and outputs. So you get an idea, get the habit of thinking that way. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I really needed to cover. As I said, we covered most of this stuff. We start getting into more interesting things later. I don't think you will need the 2 hours to do this on Thursday, so we may do other stuff, but I'll give you some time to work on this on Thursday. If you need 2 hours, do you guys think you need 2 hours? It's not that complicated of an assignment at this point. In fact, one of them is just doing some prints at the top of the. Also, feel free to play. Yeah.
Do you want us to submit the file today?
No. I mean, if you're done, you can. You can submit whenever you're done, but I mean, you don't have to. It's not even due until what, Thursday. And if you are done, though, you can submit it at any time. And if it takes you longer than Thursday, you can. I don't take points off for lateness, although sometimes.
So you said we're going to be working on it on Thursday.
I will give you some time. I don't promise the whole class because I don't think you need 2.5 hours. So I will post the code for this. I'm going to kill the video. As you can tell from the way class went today, there's a lot of this video that is just going to be dead space.